So, although it's fallen out of the news somewhat of late, the Hong Kong protests still rage over an extradition law and the premature erosion of one country, two systems by the PRC. So, as protests move into their 7th month of continuous demonstration, I want to cover an interesting development that's occurred in the face of increasing surveillance over the citizens of Hong Kong. So, let's talk about how decentralization is helping the protesters fight back. Welcome to Ready Set Crypto. This is your brain on blockchain. So surveillance and privacy are some of the biggest issues of our time. And certainly China has made it clear that they have a hardline stance on this. I saw this surveillance firsthand when I traveled to Shenzhen last year and learned about how small crimes are instantly dealt with using things like facial recognition. A jaywalk across the street? Expect to receive a fine on your phone within 20 seconds. Park a rental bike outside of its proper zone? Expect a hit to your social credit score. There's even a story about a man who was fined while driving because he itched his ear, which the surveillance system mistook as him talking on the phone. But while that anecdotal evidence is certainly alarming, and certainly merits a whole other conversation about the larger implications of privacy and heavy-handed surveillance, what I'd rather spend this video talking about is how the citizens and protesters of Hong Kong are responding to it. We've definitely seen striking examples of how protesters are cutting down facial recognition camera towers, but there's another tool of passive resistance that the protesters are employing: mesh networks. Now, mesh networks might sound like something confusing or esoteric, but in reality, there are small-scale decentralized networks that operate using the collective power of many individual devices. Just like blockchain, there's no authority in a mesh network. The decentralization opportunity opens up the possibilities of hundreds of new forms of technologies and business ideas that will disrupt markets. But let's bring this back to what the Hong Kong protesters are doing and why they're doing it. Let's ponder it this way. How would you communicate and organize if the government shut off the internet? Or even if they left it on, how would you be sure that there's open communication when the government is actively surveilling you and there's censorship operations in place? Well, that's exactly the dilemma that the protesters are facing. And their answer is a mesh network. Specifically, startup BridgeFi's Bluetooth-based messaging app. The app can connect people via standard Bluetooth across the entire city, thanks to a mesh network. Chatting is speediest when people are close, of course, within 100 meters or so. But you can also chat with people who are further away. Your messages simply hop via other BridgeFi users' phones until they find your intended target. While you can chat privately with contacts, the real power here is that you can also broadcast to anyone within range, even if they're not a contact. And that's clearly the ideal scenario for protesters who are trying to reach people but can't use traditional SMS texting, email, or the undisputed Uber app of China, WeChat, because they're not reliable and all of them are monitored by the state. So mesh networks are an interesting subset of decentralization and definitely an interesting use case as well. However, and unfortunately, mesh networks aren't without their own drawbacks and challenges, and this is certainly exacerbated in the presence of a hostile actor trying to undermine the operation. Additionally, in Hong Kong, given the density of the buildings, it's a bit hard to have line of sight, so it'll be hard to build a local network. But it's still possible to build a completely wireless network over the top of the buildings to communicate with each other. And furthermore, there's the threat that mainland China will force a compromised Bluetooth patch using over-the-air updates. Of course, that's not a kill switch due to how fragmented and terrible Bluetooth is at being a standard, but it will be enough to cripple the network. Still, this is a very interesting and unique case of citizen resistance and organization using decentralization. Just as much as the crypto community seems to hold up cryptocurrency as being used in nations like Venezuela and Argentina, I think we should also place emphasis on the nature of decentralization being accepted and utilized in these extreme cases. After all, mesh networks and decentralization go hand in hand and will have significant commercial and civil implications down the road. In a follow-up video, we're going to talk more about the industrial applications of things like mesh networks, working in concert with other emerging technologies such as IoT and AI. So definitely look forward to that. But what do you think? Do you support this use case of decentralization, or do you believe it's ultimately doomed to fail? Well, let's discuss in the comments below, and if you haven't done so already, definitely get on our free newsletter where we talk about what's hot and what's going on in the crypto space by going to rscnewsletter.com. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.